Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Einstein once said, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it," which basically, paraphrasing it, means you can't solve a problem with the ways of thinking that created the problem in the first place. So if our current mindset or way of thinking contributed to the problem, it's unlikely that our current mindset is going to contribute to the solution.
So we're obviously talking about problem and solution mindsets today. And I was thinking about this in the lead up about the last time I got stuck in a problem mindset. Have you ever been stuck in one?
Yeah.
I got stuck in one. I was thinking two examples and they happened to be at the exact same time, where I was in a job that I hated, that didn't align with my values, and I was in a relationship that I hated, that was not a good relationship. And I just got stuck in this rut for a long time of just complaining endlessly about both of them. And when we were thinking about this today, I was thinking it's because I felt powerless to change them. It's because I didn't think I could solve them. So the only solution I could think of was to just whine endlessly about them and just let it take up too much headspace.
I think that's a really interesting, is that a signal or evidence that you're stuck in problem mindset when in fact you find yourself complaining a lot? And I remember a season in life when I'd come home from work and I would complain to Kyle. And that's very different from us wrestling with really interesting opportunities and problems as it relates to, for example, Powrsuit. We talk about it all the time, and I'm like, if we just this, or this is going well, or this talk didn't go quite well, and that to me feels like we're wrestling with a solution and brainstorming. But I do remember a season in life. Perfect signal is I came home and I complained every day, and I remember thinking, gosh, this must be getting old for him.
I mean, I've done it to you before with my relationship where I was I complained for a year to you. I didn't worry about you getting old for you. But I do wonder if we think about everything as a continuum. I'm a huge fan of a problem mindset. I think it is a superpower to be able to really, firstly, identify potential problems. And we're writing our newsletter on this week too. But the more senior you get in your career, the more your ability to be able to see risks and spot potential problems before they arise, huge superpower. As is really getting to the bottom of a problem before trying to solve it, because it shortcuts all the silly things that come when you quickly jump to an idea and you roll it out and realize at the end it's probably not the best solution to the problem because you hadn't really figured out what the problem was. So yes. Problem mindset, amazing, but it's a continuum. And I wonder if at one extreme end it turns into victim mindset if you stay in it too long. And I think solution mindset, equally powerful, incredible tool to use. And I did find Obama's quote about his one big piece of advice for leaders these days is to just be someone who can get stuff done. Be the person who doesn't sophisticatedly talk about problems and articulate them in great ways. Just be the person to go, how do I help with this, and get it done. And I loved that way. Mm-hmm. But again, if you jump to solution mode too quickly, it can be really annoying if you just want to vent and someone else just jumps and tries to solve your problem. And also you can sometimes jump to the wrong solution. So you need a combo of them.
Yeah, and I love how you said not only is it a continuum, because it's the mindset is also contextual, and you needing to figure out what is the mindset that's needed in this situation. Is it a problem mindset where I'm really seeking to get to the bottom of it or helping someone to get to the bottom of it? Or is it in fact time to get out of problem mindset and move to solution mindset? Mm-hmm. And I think contextual can be in so many different scenarios. For example, as a leader, if people come to you with a problem, sometimes you genuinely have to be the one to jump to solution mode.
Yeah.
Other times you're pushing it back on them to come to you with a solution at the same time. Being a family member or a parent, quite often family members come to you with problems, or kids, for example. As a parent, I have a bad habit, as I know many will, of jumping to solution mode with my children. Maybe that's a biological thing, like protecting and saving or something, and that is it survival thing where you're like, I just need to get them comfortable. Therefore, I have to solve their problem for them. I know that I've got a habit in doing that as a team member and as a friend. When friends come to you, quite often, you do want to just solve their problems for them.
Absolutely. I think the parenting one might be because when you do have tiny babies, they are hopeless and helpless. So you have to solve all their problems. Because I'd say my sister last week would say, Well, when you've got two children spewing all night and they come in covered in vomit and their bed's covered in vomit, has gone through multiple layers of sheets, you just got to solve that problem at 3 a.m. and be done with it. And then when they're 14, you might still be in that mindset of it and realize that now it's on them to solve it a bit more. I don't know, but I feel like...
it is. Like at the end of the day, we want their lives to be comfortable. And when someone comes home in pain because they've been bullied or they've broken up with a relationship or something's happened that's been traumatic to them, we want to lessen that pain. And so immediately jump to, well, maybe this or well, maybe that. And I know I've been caught out a few times by Adeline saying, I don't need you to solve my problem. I just need you to empathize.
Yeah, no, that's so true, isn't it? And it is out of the goodness of our hearts, but it is very useful to know. I when doing some research for this, I haven't read the articles because we'll do something about it in the future, but this concept of the different hats you can put on, and I like seeing both of these as two different hats, and really visualizing the problem hat and the solution hat means it makes it a little bit easier to, rather than slap a label on yourself and go, I only see the negative, or I'm a risk person, or I'm a solution person, into I'm just wearing this hat now, and I'm just wearing this hat now, and know when we can swap them around and when to utilize each hat. I really like that way of thinking about it.
Yes, we are going to jump into 3 tips in order to jump into a solution mindset, which is an incredibly powerful mindset to be. So we're going to talk about 3 ways to do that. We talk a lot at Powrsuit. You are allowed to get with your peer groups or your small groups, and you are allowed to vent. You're allowed to, whatever the thing is on your mind, you're allowed to do that. But then you must jump to solution mode and action mode. The red flag for me was that I was coming home and complaining every day. Can you think of some other red flags that might indicate it's time to jump to solution mode?
I think I think you've probably nailed it. If you've been dwelling on something for a very long time, I think it can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because what I tend to find is problems in my life get bigger and bigger and bigger the more I dwell on them. And that could be a difficult dynamic at work. You know, we often say give feedback early and timely. If someone said something that you were offended by and then you don't do anything, and then the next time they do something, you are more likely to jump to feeling offended, and then it blows up and up and up, and suddenly it's this massive problem. So I think the amount of time it's gone undealt with probably is a thing, and I noticed that. I think the other one is, and I don't know if this is a symptom, but maybe it is checking our language. Like, it's so easy to get caught in a trap of talking negatively and, like, I don't know, just sort of complaining about things. And this is what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, where I started to feel a bit wobbly because I was just surrounded by economic doom and gloom chat, and everything's hard and everyone's complaining about cost of living. And it's true. All these things are true, but being surrounded by it, I notice it really does start to impact me after a while. I catch it or something.
Yeah, great. I love that you can catch that for yourself. And what I heard were a few behavioral themes in there. Was number 1, overthinking. So I think if you find yourself consistently overthinking, overanalyzing, and ruminating, I've been guilty of that before. That might be you're sitting in problem mindset a little bit too long. The same thing I think is anxiety. When we start to really worry about things, that's probably time where you have to go, right, solution mindset, let's go.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that feeling of helplessness. I think when you feel helpless, it's probably I like that Einstein quote, you're staying in that same consciousness of when you first identified it. You haven't managed to snap out into a different way of thinking about it.
Yep.
So
amazing. Well, here are 3 ways to shift more quickly to a solution mindset. And the first is to take note. And this one's all about awareness. This is about actually recognizing, when presented with a problem, what are our natural tendencies? Where do we go in terms of our thinking, in terms of our attitude, in terms of our, positive versus kind of negative sentiment? How am I responding to this problem?
And it may even be one step before that of how do you respond to new things? Because I think we are all different, bring different strengths to the table. And I think and I was, again, doing some research for this. And one of the things is, and I know this because we've worked with a lot of people in risk, and they will look at one of our ideas. We build on each other's ideas. So we're more like sitting in solution mode. And then someone will identify a bunch of risk. And I have huge respect for them because their brain can see an idea, and rather than go straight to all the good things, balance it with bad things. And they're not negative. It's not pessimistic. It's just that they go, oh, here's some things that you may not have thought of. hugely valuable. So you might have one tendency one way or the other naturally.
Oh, and I think it's so interesting you said that, because we often don't like change as humans, and it's because our brains are lazy and we just like everything simple and efficient, and that is often makes life pleasant when we can just
When nothing changes.
Yeah, when we're not uncomfortable, because
Yeah.
change is uncomfortable. And it's as simple as, I do remember when this hot desking phenomenon came up, that was a real problem for someone, in this concept of, I actually maybe have to come in and sit in a different desk, and I don't get to have my family photo up or my plant, and I have to share with someone, and that feels really uncomfortable. And I remember at the time there was a lot of this, oh my gosh, people are like crazy about their desks, but actually overall it is change and it's uncomfortable. So what are your patterns as it relates to when a new thing pops up or something changes?
Is it, oh, this is exciting, or, oh, this is really annoying and hard? I mean, we had it, one of our tools we rely on heavily for Powrsuit changed their layout, and we were both like, oh, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, now I have to go learn something, and it's annoying, and I liked the old one, I'd figured it out, now I have to do the new one.
I know, well, especially when you don't understand the why. And I sometimes realize that. So leaders, remember this: when there is change, start with the why. And quite often that's a perfect example, is we just logged in, and I know this has happened with Facebook. You log in and everything is different, and we don't really ever get the benefit of the why. That comes from the powers that be. And so if, as you're a leader and you're looking to hot desk, or you're looking to change something at work or implement a new process, you really have to start with the why, so that you get the buy-in before implementing the change.
So true, so true. But I do like this taking note of, so what's your gut instinct when something new arises? Is it to, and it's really easy to sort of pay attention. Like and I'm different in different cases. Like if someone says, I'm packing up my life and moving to the other side of the world, my gut feel is like, oh, stress, hard. How do you meet people? How do you find a job? I think of all the problems. Whereas if someone's like, hey, let's take 3 months off and go overseas, I'm like all solution mode. I'm like, how do we make it happen? So I think it is contextual, but it's really worth paying attention to your first instinct after something arises. Does it veer towards negative? Does it, not negative, does it veer towards problems, or does it veer towards solutions? And that might give you a little bit of insight where you naturally sit.
Again, it probably is depending on the season of life and how you're feeling about everything around you. But we've got these deep grooves of familiar patterns of how we take information in and how we react to that information. And sometimes when we're in the real negative time of life, those brain synapses find a pathway for you to receive information, and they immediately go to all the things that could be wrong, or overthinking, anxiety and overthinking negatively. And that's something that actually happens in our brains. A friend of mine who's really struggling with this, with glass half empty stuff, ended up going to therapy and had to effectively retrain the synapses in her brain. And she did that by grateful exercises. And what are 5 things that she was grateful at the end of the day before bed? 5 things, or you can do it in the morning, and it retrains your brain to actually think about the positive, and then those new synapses in your brain start to fire.
Things that I have been really working on in the last couple of years is default responses. So it's really easy in this world to, when someone asks how you are, to say busy or stressed. We use those words a lot, and I started to get really careful about, am I more busy than usual or am I less busy than usual? Because all of this is a continuum. So I should really only be saying busy 1 out of every 3 to 5 weeks, because it shouldn't always be busy, and so by removing some of those kind of negative words, it really made me more thoughtful about how I really am, rather than defaulting to telling myself and others a story about hard things. And I notice it now, it's very easy to arrive in a social situation and want to jump straight into complaining about work. And we talk about this a lot at Powrsuit, of we can bond over complaining, and it's a really almost a cheap trick of bonding, because you all get together and complain about how tough everything is and how stupid everyone is, and it's like easy to bond over that, but it also creates this really negative environment. And I have found, now I pay attention to that, I remove myself from those environments really quickly. Like, I am here for as long as you have a problem, I will be there, but I won't be there to pretend we have problems, or like to just buy into that negative talk all the time,
Yeah.
I think. And I know that, I feel like that might sound really harsh, but
No, I don't think so. I remember being in the corporate world and never understanding why people sat in jobs when they started to complain all the time. For me, it didn't make sense. But now realizing human psychology and change and how hard it is, sometimes that is something that's a natural groove in their brains. That was how they were bonding with people. But for me, that negatively affects your personal brand. It negatively affects your well-being. And I always just remember thinking, no one is forcing you to be here. Like, you actually can go somewhere else. And the minute I woke up, and I got this piece of advice, my brother doesn't know this, my older brother, but this was way back in my 20s, very early in my career. And I remember him saying, when you wake up and you're no longer happy and it's not fun anymore, I know that sounds so simple, and it's not fun anymore, you know it's time to move on. And I've always employed that technique in a roundabout way. Yes, I've had the privilege to move on because of an education and hustling and connections, but I just remember when I wake up and I'm unhappy, that isn't a state I want to be in. And so I took action and moved on.
I agree. And yes, there is privilege in that, but there's also hard work. And I think this idea of when you're not happy, you move on. It's not like you quit your job the next day. You just put in place the things you needed to do to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And that could take, I know people who are planning 6 to 12 months out going, I can't leave this job straight away. We're not in the world's best job market, but I'm going to start solving the problem today. And I think there's something under this take note section around realizing and recognizing, and we say this at Powrsuit all the time, we have far more control than we sometimes realize. And I was actually thinking about this in context of the gender leadership gap, because by rights, and this is one of the tensions of what we do, women should just be rioting in the streets and just angry all the time about how unfair it is that we have this gap. But it's just unproductive. So we actually need to take control. And when we started working on Powrsuit, that's when we realized we've actually got so many more levers to pull than we realize. And once you move on from, yes, it's deeply unfair, and we can sit and talk about this a lot, how unfair it is, and I've noticed it on International Women's Day and stuff now, everyone's moving towards less talk, more action. And I feel like that's a great example on a mass scale of going, time to move from problem mode into solution mode.
Agreed. Let's look at the second way to shift into a solution mindset. And this is about finding perspective and really being curious about other people's thoughts as it relates to the situation or the problem. We often feel as though we navigate everything on our own. It's all sitting in our brains. And that's why I think going to therapy, talking about it with a friend, having a personal board of directors that we've thought about, a partner, that's why we come and offload to our partners, is because we need to find perspective in other humans. And I think that's a really healthy place to be.
And I think perspective in ourselves, and this is something that I have been mentoring for the last couple of weeks, because I feel like I've struggled a little bit in the last couple of weeks with feeling solution focused, because we're in the middle of the grind, right? Like, we are starting a new company, and some of us were stupid enough to kick off renovations at the same time. And so there's a lot of money going out. There's a lot of hard work learning how to learn incredibly challenging new skills, getting fully out of our comfort zone. And I have to keep saying to myself, okay, if it's that hard and you're feeling like you want to focus on the problem, go get a job. And then I'm like, this is a conversation I have in my own head. And then I'm like, I don't want to get a job. And it's like, well, maybe in perspective, this is just a hard thing. This is not terrible. This is not worth moaning about. This is just a hard thing. And it's great to get support. And we're very good at that. We just wrap ourselves then, and we have 5 calls with 5 other founders about how hard it is to do sales in this environment, or how they do sales, so we can learn. And we just get out of that. It's so easy to fall into it, but to get out of that and go get that perspective and go, is it hard enough that you want to choose another option? Or is it actually just hard? And sometimes life is just hard.
And I think I found kind of 2 active or verbs as part of that. And the first is to go and seek others, go seek out others. So there's something active in that you actually have to go find people to talk to and seek it out. But the second I heard was reflect, to actually take the time to reflect and go through all the, well, then what? And then what? And then what? And quite often I think there's that 5 whys, isn't there, in problem solving, where you're like, why does this matter? And then why does that matter? And then why does that matter? And once you get to the final kind of why, then you get to the root and then you're like, so that reflection is perspective.
I so agree. And they often say that with resilience as well. And I remember, I've talked about this a little bit, not a lot recently, but early on in my career, I was in a terrible relationship. I sound like I'm always in terrible relationships, but this one really was. And we had a business together, and I ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands in legal fees to get rid of him. It was awful. It was really bad. And I remember at 23 thinking, this better be the hardest thing I ever have to go through. And strangely, now, whenever something's bad, I look back and go, oh, this is nothing compared to that.
That's so good.
And so I think sometimes when you've had a really tough thing, just, this might sound silly again, but compare it to that thing and go, is this as hard as that? Because if I can get through that, I can get through this. And it just sort of helps you get out of that feeling of powerlessness.
Probably a good point to point out that was quite traumatic for you. And I know that if you were to try and peel back the layers of someone who genuinely is a negative Nancy in the workplace, they probably do have some sort of trauma associated with it. So all due respect, this is probably that action of actually going to seek perspective in therapy because that's real.
I agree with that. And actually I've had a couple of conversations, I don't know about you, but recently where I've actually suggested therapy. And maybe that's overstepping, but when someone has complained to me too many times about the same thing, I'm like, this is beyond my expertise. Like, there are people whose job it is to help you work through this. And I often meet resistance, and I think there's still a bit of a stigma around therapy. And if you're listening and considering it or not considering it because of a stigma, please let that go, because everyone I know who's had therapy, it has been life-changing. And actually, do you know, funnily enough, I heard from a Powrsuiter the other day that said she was listening to our podcast on her way to the airport, and we said go to therapy, and she went.
Wow.
She was like, and I went, and it's really, really helped me. So there is no stigma around getting that perspective to help you get out of that mode.
Yeah, love that. Okay, and the third and final way to shift, actually it's not the final, but we'd just like the 3 tips to share with you today, but to shift to a solution mindset is this question: where do you usually solve problems? Recreate that environment. I remember not a very nice time in my life was middle school, or secondary school as it's called here. And I remember my parents had divorced and my mum was dating a new boyfriend, and that was quite traumatic for me because I'd had her for about 10 years all by myself. And then I had friends that I was no longer a best friend to this. Like, there was this friend jockeying, and I felt isolated and huge amounts of anxiety in mid. And that's also, you're 13. It's an awful time to be.
What? I think 13's known for being like the highlight of people's lives.
You're joking, right? Yeah, good. I was like, why?
13 is the pits.
I was like, what was wrong with me? It was the pits. You have acne, all this stuff. And I was a swimmer at the time, a synchronized swimmer, but our morning sessions were just speed work and laps. And we would do over an hour of just swimming laps. And that is where all of my solutions to my problems came to me. And I just remember putting things into perspective, figuring out how might I talk to this person? How might I, and it was really helpful for me to work through that. And so now what I've realized is, for me, it's walking. It's walking the dog or walking in the bush. It's not surfing. I have to focus too much on surfing.
Yeah, you gotta stay alive in surfing.
It's actually not, it's a unique environment that ideas just come to me, and I'm in a positive mindset. I think it's because I enjoy doing the activity. The cadence of the activity is such that my brain is in tune with all of the solutions, and my brain is expansive.
I get it from painting as well, but because it's so repetitive. And I think there is something, and I've heard it with walking in particular, it's actually meant to be really good for preventing things like Alzheimer's, because I think it triggers part of your brain that, when you think about what goes into walking, there's a huge amount of processes that go into getting you to walk, but they're all unconscious. So you're not thinking about walking. You don't have to think about it. Your body just moves. So that leaves your brain free, or part of your brain free, to wander. And I would assume it's probably the same with swimming. If you're a really good swimmer, you're not thinking about swimming. But your brain isn't able to focus. It's not distracted, so it's got that ability to kind of wander. So it's the flow
in a way.
Yeah, I think it is.
Wow.
I do that, and I remember specifically a time where I had, when we were starting Powrsuit, and I was like doing the classic, going back to old Einstein, which was probably his wife, by the way, saying that. But I hate when men get attributed for their wives' things. Look up Einstein. His wife was incredible. But that idea of like, I'm sitting staring blankly at a computer screen trying to solve a problem, and I didn't get out of the condition to be able to change the problem, to change the way I looked at it. So I was like, stuff it. I'm going to go to the movies with mum and dad, and literally on the 15-minute walk into town solve the problem.
Yeah.
So a very similar thing.
Yeah.
I think people often talk about shower thoughts. I sometimes am someone, I've got my phone by my bed now, but I will jot down thoughts as I'm going to sleep when I'm driving, because that's another one of those things. You have to pay attention to driving, but a lot of it's on autopilot.
Yeah.
And I used to do voice notes in the car. I'd be like, is it Lewis Litt from Suits? I'd be like voice noting my way up the country because it's just like you've got these thoughts and you just let them out.
So to shortcut yourself out of problem mindset to solution mindset is to take note, find some perspective in others, and then figuring out how to recreate that environment of where you generally solve your problems. We have a special ask for you today.
Help us solve our problem.
Yeah. And opportunity for that matter is that we have had a really nice early growing momentum in terms of our Powrsuit membership network. And we've had some fabulous members in there. We're sorting out the product in terms of our mini masterclasses and interviews and all of the fabulous connections that we're making in there. But we would love to know what's keeping you from joining the Powrsuit membership network. And we are going to ask you, hello@powrsuit.com, to email us. We want to know. Is it time? Is it that it doesn't feel relevant? Is it cost? You could help solve our problem in just telling us why and the honest truth.
Never heard about it, haven't paid attention to it, feels too expensive, feels too cheap. Manager won't give you money. We don't care what it is.
Yeah.
We know there's thousands of people who listen to our podcast and who subscribe to our newsletter who haven't joined the network yet.
Yeah.
And we want to know why. And we're not going to force you to do it. We just want to know why you're not, so that we can solve that problem.
That fits under number 2 by Find Perspective, actually. So we would love to hear from you.
Just do it now. Do it now.
Thank you so much. Lovely to connect with you. We look forward to those emails. hello@powrsuit.com, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.